These are famous atheists who, through God's grace, found their way to Christianity. These stories remind us that no one is beyond the reach of God's love, and that the truth of the gospel can change even the hardest of hearts. C.S. Lewis. The celebrated author of The Chronicles of Narnia was once a self-proclaimed atheist who viewed religion as a myth designed for the weak. Born in Belfast in 1898, Lewis showed a keen interest in literature and philosophy from a young age. By age 14, he had rejected Christianity, embracing atheism as a more rational worldview. However, his intellectual pursuits led him to question the very foundations of his disbelief. Influenced by friendships with notable Christians like J.R.R. Tolkien and his own study of philosophy and literature, Lewis found himself confronted with the idea of God. His moment of surrender came in 1929, when he described himself as the most dejected and reluctant convert in all England. Lewis became one of Christianity's most influential apologists, articulating profound theological truths in works like Mere Christianity and The Problem of Pain. His transformation from skeptic to believer is a powerful testament to the intellectual and spiritual journey toward faith. Antony Flew. Antony Flew, one of the most prominent atheist philosophers of the 20th century, shocked the world when he declared his belief in God late in life. Flew spent decades arguing against the existence of God, adhering to a strict materialistic worldview. His debates and writings, such as The Presumption of Atheism, were foundational for modern atheism. However, advancements in science, particularly in biology and cosmology, began to challenge his views. Flew was deeply moved by the complexity of DNA and the evidence of fine-tuning in the universe, which he saw as pointing toward an intelligent designer. In 2004, Flew announced his shift to theism, stating, "I now believe that the universe was brought into existence by an infinite intelligence." Although he initially stopped at theism, Flew later explored Christianity and expressed admiration for the teachings of Jesus. His journey illustrates the profound impact of intellectual honesty in the face of compelling evidence.
What were some of the factors that prompted you to, in recent years, reconsider atheism and to come to the conclusion that there is a intelligence?
It's been entirely these, I suppose, biological discoveries and discoveries about the chemistry.
So
These things.
The complexity and...
Yeah, the integrated complexity argument.
Now, when you talk about the integrated complexity,
Yeah.
is it the unlikelihood of that developing naturalistically, the first complex integrated biological system? Is that where the problem you saw?
Well, yes, because after all, there is a problem about the physical nature. There's if the integrated complexity of the physical world is a good reason, as Einstein clearly thought it was, of believing that there was an intelligence behind it, then this argument applies a fortiori with the inordinately greater integrated complexity of the living world. And it seems to me this is just obvious that that argument is much stronger now.
And this was one of the factors that led you to conclude there must be an intelligence.
Yeah. It was accepting Einstein, who after all was the person who's qualified to judge, and seeing that a fortiori this applied, where of course Einstein didn't have any authority at all and wasn't inclined reasonably enough to talk about it.
Lee Strobel. Lee Strobel, once a self-described atheist and skeptic, is now one of Christianity's most vocal defenders. As a legal editor for the Chicago Tribune, Strobel relied on evidence and logic in his work. His wife's conversion to Christianity initially frustrated him, prompting Strobel to embark on a personal investigation to disprove her faith. Using his journalistic skills, Strobel interviewed experts in history, theology, and science, intending to debunk the claims of Christianity. To his surprise, the evidence he uncovered, particularly regarding the resurrection of Jesus, began to challenge his disbelief, and Strobel eventually realized that Christianity offered the most coherent explanation for the historical and spiritual questions he had. This journey of transformation is documented in his best-selling book, The Case for Christ. Today, Strobel is a pastor, author, and speaker, inspiring millions with his story of moving from skepticism to belief through rigorous investigation and personal reflection.
But for most of my life, I was an atheist. I thought the idea of an all-loving, all-powerful creator of the universe, I thought it was stupid. I mean, my background's in journalism and law. I tended to be a skeptical person. I was a legal editor of the Chicago Tribune. So I needed evidence before I believe anything. One day my wife came up to me. She had been agnostic. And she said after a period of spiritual investigation, she decided to become a follower of Jesus Christ. And I thought, you know, this is the worst possible news I could get. I thought she was going to turn into some sexually repressed prude who was going to spend all of her time serving the poor in Skid Row somewhere. I thought this was the end of our marriage. But in the ensuing months, I saw positive changes in her values, in her character, in the way she related to me and the children. It was winsome and it was attractive. And it made me want to check things out. So I went to church one day, mainly to try to see if I could get her out of this cult that she's gotten involved in. But I heard the message of Jesus articulated for the first time in a way that I could understand. That forgiveness is a free gift. And that Jesus Christ died for our sins, that we might spend eternity with Him. And I walked out saying, I was still an atheist, but also saying, if this is true, this has huge implications for my life. And so I used my journalism training and legal training to begin an investigation into whether there was any credibility to Christianity or to any other world faith system for that matter. I did that for a year and 9 months until November the 8th of 1981. And on that day, I realized that in light of the torrent of evidence flowing in the direction of the truth of Christianity, it would require more faith for me to maintain my atheism than to become a Christian. Because to be an atheist, I would have to swim upstream against this torrent of evidence pointing toward the truth of Jesus Christ. And I couldn't do that. I was trained in journalism and law to respond to truth. And so on that day, I received Jesus Christ as my forgiver and as my leader. And just like with my wife, my life began to change over time. My values, my character, the purpose of my life began to be transformed over time in a way that, as I look back, I can't imagine staying on the path I was on compared to the adventure and the fulfillment and the joy of following Jesus Christ.
Francis Collins. Francis Collins, renowned geneticist and director of the National Institutes of Health, transitioned from atheism to Christianity through his exploration of science and faith. Initially a staunch atheist during his medical studies, Collins was challenged by a terminally ill patient who asked him about his beliefs. This encounter led him to explore philosophical and theological questions, eventually encountering C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. Collins was struck by the concept of moral law, which he saw as a signpost pointing to a divine lawgiver. His work on the Human Genome Project further deepened his awe for creation, as he marveled at the intricacy and complexity of DNA. In his book, The Language of God, Collins describes how science and faith complement rather than contradict each other. His journey from disbelief to faith highlights how intellectual inquiry and scientific discovery can lead to a profound understanding of the divine.
And for the first couple of years of medical school, I maintained my atheist perspective, feeling that there was really nothing worth examining that couldn't be examined by science. And then in my third year as a medical student, where I was now placed at the bedside of people who were suffering with terrible illnesses that I knew we probably weren't going to be able to cure, I had to really start to wrestle with these big questions like, why am I here? What is the meaning of life? Is there a God? Does God care about me? What happens after you die? And at a particularly seminal moment, an elderly woman who was my patient shared her faith with me, and then unexpectedly turned to me and said, you haven't said anything about what you believe. And over a 2-year period of much struggle trying to shore up my atheism, to my surprise, I found that atheism was the least rational of all the choices, the assertion of a universal negative, which scientists aren't supposed to do. And agnosticism ended up feeling like kind of a cop-out, like I don't want to go too far down this road. And ultimately, with a lot of help from C.S. Lewis, and beginning to understand what the words of the Bible were all about, I began to see that actually, for me, the most rational choice was going to be to become a believer in God. But then what kind of God would that be? I had to survey the world's religions and try to figure out what they said, and they had a lot in common. But one thing that Christianity stood out in a way that solved a huge problem for me was the person of Jesus. Because I had become aware that God probably was out there, and God probably cared about me, and I was a million miles away from being in a place where I felt I could have relationship or even approach the holiness of God. I needed some kind of way to bridge that gap. And you know what that way turned out to be: Jesus Christ. And so I fell on my knees in my 27th year in a dewy grass on an early morning in the Cascades of the Northwest, and I gave my life to Christ. And that was 46 years ago.
Rosaria Butterfield. Rosaria Butterfield was once a prominent atheist and feminist scholar, deeply entrenched in progressive ideologies. As a tenured professor specializing in queer theory, Butterfield viewed Christianity as a religion of bigotry and intolerance. However, her perspective began to shift after she wrote an article critiquing Christian values and received a thoughtful response from a local pastor. This sparked a friendship that would change her life. Over time, their discussions led Butterfield to study the Bible seriously, challenging her assumptions about faith, morality, and identity. She ultimately experienced a profound spiritual transformation, embracing Christianity and leaving her former lifestyle behind. Butterfield's journey is chronicled in her memoir, The Secret Thoughts of an Unlikely Convert. Today, she speaks openly about the power of grace, the importance of truth, and her new life in Christ, offering hope and encouragement to those who feel far from God. These powerful testimonies show that God's love and truth can reach anyone, no matter where they are in life. If their stories have touched your heart, we encourage you to seek God for yourself. He is always waiting with open arms. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of faith and inspiration. May God bless you and guide you on your journey. See you in the next video.